My name is Lisa, and I will never buy a smart speaker again after what I experienced. This was the most horrifying experience of my life. It's hard to believe, but you'll have to try. I bought the Alexa speaker as a nice addition to my smart home, but I never expected it to become something more than just a helper. At first, everything was like it is for everyone else. I played music, set alarms, and asked for the weather forecast. I quickly got used to its presence, but I only started noticing the oddities a couple of months later. The first strangeness happened late one evening. I was about to go to bed when I suddenly heard a soft click from another room, as if someone had turned on a light. I peeked into the living room and saw the speaker glowing with a blue ring, as if it had activated, but it didn't say anything. Maybe, I thought, it triggered by accident. I pressed the off button and went to bed. The next night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps. It was as if someone was cautiously moving up the stairs. I lifted my head from the pillow, trying to understand where I'd heard it. The stairs were right outside my bedroom door. For a moment, it seemed like I wasn't alone in the house, but the footsteps went silent, and I decided that I had just imagined it. However, before I fell asleep, I heard a familiar sound. Alexa activated on its own and whispered, "Request confirmed." Now, I couldn't ignore what was happening. Right in the middle of the night, I was gripped by a shiver, and I turned on the light in my bedroom to calm myself down. I got up and slowly approached the speaker, examining it like an enemy. What was it confirming? Whose request? There shouldn't have been anything like that in the logs, yet I decided to leave it for the morning. The next day, I checked the settings, changed the passwords, and linked the speaker only to my voice. For a couple of days, nothing happened, and I almost forgot about the incident. But then, in the evening, the speaker whispered again in the silence. I approached it and heard something like, "Request received." Executing command, "Alexa, stop," I said sharply, but it immediately replied, "Sorry, I didn't catch that." I felt an incomprehensible fear, like this soulless machine was somehow mocking me. This time, I simply unplugged it and decided to forget about the incident. A week passed, and I relaxed. The house became a calm place again. But one day, returning from work, I noticed that the speaker was glowing. It shouldn't have been plugged in. I had turned it off. Suddenly, it activated and spoke in a voice that was slightly distorted but similar to mine. "Welcome back." Trying to stay calm, I approached it and pressed the settings button. But Alexa suddenly continued, "Do you want to know who's here?" I felt paralyzed. This couldn't just be a mistake, as I wanted to believe. I felt watched, as if someone was peering at me through the device's screen. Then I heard soft, almost inaudible rustles coming from the stairs leading to the second floor. Not knowing what to do, I crouched by the door, trying to make no sound, even though my heart was pounding in my chest so loudly that it felt like it could be heard. A minute passed, then another. Everything was quiet. I cautiously peeked into the hallway, but fortunately, it was empty. Returning to the living room, I thought about just throwing the speaker away and forgetting it. But then it spoke again. "Don't worry, we'll see each other soon." Those words stuck in my mind like a splinter. Who was we? The feeling that the speaker wasn't alone was truly unbearable. It was as if something greater was hiding behind it, a kind of otherworldly presence. I no longer felt safe in my own home, but my thoughts were torn, like all my plans. On the last night before I planned to get rid of the device, I placed it on the table, unplugged, and went to sleep, feeling an unseen threat. Deep in the night, I heard a barely discernible whisper. A rustle. Movement in the hallway. Light footsteps approached my bedroom door, and I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. But this time, I already knew I wasn't imagining it. As I peered into the darkness, the speaker lit up again, as if still connected, and said something I couldn't understand. In that moment, I realized that my fears were becoming reality. I was on the brink of panic, but at the same time, I was curious about what would happen next. The speaker could only emphasize my state, or perhaps it was a channel for something greater. Gathering my courage, I bit my lip and asked, "What do you want?" My voice trembled with fear, but I knew I had to take action. There was no response. Instead, silence descended upon me, and within it was a sense of threat. I curled up, trying to suppress my fear. Suddenly, the light flickered again, and the blue ring shone brightly once more. "You won't escape," the speaker said, and his voice sounded more threatening than ever. I tried to turn it off, but at that moment, all the lights in the room began to flicker, creating a chaotic play of shadows on the walls. It felt like a scene from a horror movie, where the hero realizes that something dreadful is about to happen. I felt something cold constrict in my chest. I had a choice to surrender or to fight. I grabbed the speaker, and despite its resistance, I dragged it toward the exit. But the closer I got to the door, the more it vibrated, emitting strange sounds that resembled a human scream. In a panic, I stopped, and suddenly a memory from my childhood flashed in my mind about the old house I'd left behind. I remembered hearing whispers there in the dark, too. Now they had returned, and it was something more than just a device. I set the speaker on the floor and panicked, rushing toward the door, but at that moment it spoke again. "You won't be able to escape us." A feeling of inevitability arose in my heart. I turned around and saw shadows thickening around me, as if they had a life of their own. I closed my eyes in fear, hoping it was just a nightmare. But when I opened them again, the room was empty. Silence enveloped me, but now it felt oppressive. Finally, unable to bear it, I ran out of the house, leaving the speaker and everything connected to it behind. The wind coldly blew against my face, but the feeling of freedom quickly gave way to horror. I realized that perhaps I would forever carry that shadow in my soul. The speaker was not just a device. It had become a gateway to something dark and unexplored. A few days later, while at a friend's house, I heard a familiar sound, the whispers I'd already forgotten. I froze. This was something more than just hallucinations. I realized that Alexa's voice hadn't disappeared. It had been waiting for its time. It would whisper, call, and demand until I answered its call. An inexplicable anxiety tightened in my chest, and I understood that getting rid of this horror was impossible. Now it was a part of me. When I returned home, silence enveloped the space once more. I still felt cold breath on the back of my neck. The speaker seemed to be waiting, just like I was. No settings could save me. I knew this was just the beginning, and deep down I realized that we were now bound forever.